All right, so this past week we learned about something called subroutines. We also learned about something called comments, and those are two of the things that the judges are going to be looking for in our competition coming up on April 6th. So I've got RoboBlocks running here, and you can see up here my robot is connected. And the way I like to do subroutines is to paint a new sprite and just make it a really simple sprite in the form of a box, like so. Our goal here is to come up with a nice blank area that we can put our subroutine code in. Now I'm going to add some text to this and call it movement subroutines. All right, the text is black, my box is black, so I'm going to turn the text white and drag it down into the box, make it a little bit smaller so it fits into the box. And I say OK. All right, now I've got a sprite named movement subroutines. Also up here I can make this sprite a little bit smaller so it stays out of the way. Up here I can name this sprite movement subs. All right, so now we've got a sprite named movement subs, and we've got this nice big clean slate of script area. So as you recall, to move our robot forward, we run the left motor at 180 and the right motor at 0. Now this is certainly something that we'll be calling over and over and over again, right? So to make this into a subroutine, we go to our control scripts and we pull out this hat that is called when I receive. This hat command, it's a hat because it goes on the top of a stack. When I receive, and I'm going to go and say new here, and I'm going to call this subroutine full forward. Now, it's important to name your subroutines so you know what they are, so they're real easy to recognize what they are. So now, whenever I call this subroutine, we're going to do that with this broadcast down here in just a minute. Whenever I call full forward, my robot will go forward at full speed. One other thing we talked about this week is the fact that many of the robots, in fact, I'm guessing all of them, do not go straight when you give it the 180 and 0. You need to figure out which of these two motors is going too fast and then slow it down a little bit. In my case, my right motor was going too fast, and in order for my robot to go perfectly straight, I would put my left motor at 180, my right motor at 10, and now full forward goes nice and straight. So full forward, nice and straight. I've got a document out on the Fondy Heat website that goes through the exercise and all the subroutines that I want you to write if you haven't done so yet. So go ahead and go to that website and see the full list of subroutines that you're going to want to write. And, of course, one of them is going to be stop. And let's just do that one real quick. I'm going to pull this hat block out real quickly here, and I'm going to go to my motion category, and to stop, it's going to be left motor stop and then right motor stop. And when I receive, I'm going to make a new one here and just call it stop. Again, it's important to have it recognizable as to what it will do. Don't call it something oddball that you might not remember what it does. So now I've got a subroutine that is full forward, and I've got a subroutine that is stop. And I can fill this whole script area with all different movement subroutines that I know I will be using. Now I'm going to take this sprite down here and just duplicate it. Now I've got two of them, and the reason I did that is because now they're the same size. But you can see when I click here, it's the same thing as when I click here over in the script area. So right here, I don't want these scripts in here because this is going to be where I put my remote controls. So now I've got this sprite. It called it Sprite 1. I'm going to go to the Costumes tab here and edit this sprite. And I'm going to change the text in here and call it remote control. Okay, so now we've got the spelling error corrected, remote control. So now we've got another nice, big, clean slate of scripts that we can do. Now, though, instead of calling left motor, right motor, and so forth, we're going to be calling our subroutines. So now, if I was to hit this broadcast full forward, and I'll do it real quick here, my robot goes forward at full speed. And if I choose stop and I hit this, my robot stops. The way to make a remote control is to pull out this hat block. Again, it goes on the top. And when blank key is pressed, and if I push this, I get all the keys on the keyboard, I'm going to say my up arrow is pressed. I want to go full forward. And I'm going to call another one of my subroutines when the S is pressed. So I'm going to choose S here. And on this case, I'm going to broadcast stop. So S is for stop. All right, so that's how you create subroutines. Here they are. Here's the subroutines, and here is where you call the subroutines. And you'll be using these subroutines over and over and over again. Now, one other thing that we learned this week that's important is to find where the actual middle of your motor is, or the stop point of the motor. In our simulator, our motor stopped at the number 90, right? And then they went forward, depending on which motor you were using, up at 180, and then went backwards at 0, and so forth. But in real life, our motors do not stop at the number 90. So we found a way to do that by using something called a variable. A variable is a place where we can store a number and retrieve that number whenever we want. Actually, we can store things like text in variables as well, but in our case, we are going to store a number. So we go to the variables column here, and we say make a variable. And I'm just going to call my variable value. And you can see that the variable shows up, and it's named value, and it's out here on the stage. And plus a whole new set of commands shows up for me as well. One really cool thing about variables in Scratch is that we can go out here on the stage and right-click on that and turn it into a slider. So it's almost like a volume control. As we move the volume control, the value goes up and down. Also, we right-click again, and there's a set slider min and max. And we're going to set, instead of our max at 100, we're going to set it to 180. And say OK. So now we've got a volume control that goes up to 180 and down to 0. And that's going to be real useful for us to find the middle of our motors, where they actually stop. So I'm going to go over here to my motion category, and I'm going to pull out a left motor block. And then back to variables, I'm going to take this value, this circle right here, this kind of oval thing, and put it in place of the number. Now, if I was to click this block, it's going to send the value of 136 or whatever this slider is set to my left motor. So right now, my left motor is turning at value 136. Let's say we want to be able to move this volume control like this and have the value here update constantly. Well, the way we do that is to go to Control and put this into a forever loop. We learned about these before. And we start that forever loop. And once we start that forever loop, we can move this value. We can move this value back and forth, and I move it until my left motor stops. And it turns out that my left motor stops at 78, 79, at 80. Okay? My left motor stops at 80. So now I know that the middle of my left motor is 80. I'm going to make a note of that here. So in the script area, I'm going to right-click and say add a comment. All right, a comment is something that's common across all programming languages, and comments are for humans to see, either you or somebody else looking at your code. So we want to remember that our left motor middle is 80. So I'm just going to make a note. that my left motor middle is 80. All right, so there's a comment, and the computer and the robot are not going to evaluate this. This is just there for us to see, and now we know that our left motor middle is 80. And I can also figure out my right motor middle by doing the same procedure, and I'm also going to leave a comment about that up in this space. So there you have it. You have movement subroutines, and again, you can go out to the Fondy Heat website and find that document of movement subroutines that I suggested anyway. And then you've got a remote control that you've written. Now make sure you save this code because you're going to be using this over and over again for the rest of the season. So there we have it. Subroutines and comments, two things that are real important to our robotics project.